advises the secret of enjoying life is to live dangerously.
He enjoyed it so much he went mad.
Look at the world and tell me the pleasures of sanity. Enjoying life is to live dangerously.
He enjoyed it so much he went mad.
Look at the world and tell me the pleasures of sanity.
Okay. Do you now have a chair back there? You get it? Okay. We're going to go ahead and start, everybody. That is your cue to start. Not. All right, there we go. So this is our second science and religion debate. We're really excited. The turnout. I don't know how many of you are actually here based on extra credit outcomes versus interest. But it's just, either way, it's great to see you all here. First and foremost, for people that are kind of curious about the structure of this debate, it's not formal at all. There's not going to be a bunch of people, well, maybe. Maybe. They might jump on each other. But really, this is a discussion. It's like a critical thinking exercise, so that you can all have an idea of different versions of science or different versions of religion and kind of see how they all work together or don't work together. I mean, that's the whole point, is to kind of see what these smart learn fellers think about it. So first and foremost, Philosophy Club, where are you guys at? Here's Mike, the treasurer. Stand up, guys. Stand up if you're here. Come on. So Adam, Matt, Ashley with 2 E's, not a Y, Lauren, other Lauren, Jared, Remy, and Brett. And Sergio's cruising around here. Thank you, guys. Also, here's our panelist. New panel this year is Professor Batchelder. You're kind of just hanging out for a semester of anthropology, right? Okay.
For the year.
Okay, awesome. So he's got some great courses next semester. You're doing ethnographic studies, right?
Ethnographic methods.
Ethnographic
my
methods.
Classes.
His classes are fun. I'm promoting for him right now. So give it a shot. He's definitely a good workload, and it's definitely entertaining material. It's going to keep you excited, not just doing papers. Ken Vander Horst is from New Life Church, correct? And who's all from New Life Church? Awesome, great. I'm glad you guys came down. That's awesome.
That's almost more than I get on Sunday.
You might want to, make things more exciting down there.
Oh, and next semester I'm going to be skiing, so if you need instruction.
And then next on this panel here is Dr. Miller. And then last but most certainly not least, Dr. Hale. They're both philosophy. Okay. Again, this is not a traditional debate, guys. We're gonna discuss some conflicting ideas and hash them out. Hopefully, this is one way you all can have some time during this first hour to build your questions, and then the second hour we're opening it up to you guys. So, can you hear me okay without me forcing this mic into my face? Can everybody hear okay? What? That'll be good for you guys to know. Really? Okay. So anyways, keep your questions in the second hour, please, to about a 5-minute limit. Like, if you feel like you still haven't gotten something taken care of, just come talk to us after, or maybe during, like, a class that you take with one of the professors. But yeah, if you have something prepared, that would be even better. Okay. I'm going to open this with a universal question to everybody. Do you think that it would be safe to say science and religion are both based off of a never-ending pursuit of wisdom and knowledge? Does this go down the panel and in some kind of acceptance form? Start, Batchelder. What do you think? Yeah, what do you think?
Okay.
Is man the measure? Is God the measure?
I don't think I need that too much.
I think a greater search for knowledge and wisdom and understanding. But I do feel that religion and science go about it in different ways. They engage different parts of the brain, actually, while you're in religious states compared to trying to solve problems scientifically. So I do think they're similar, looking for the same things, but differences in how they go about it.
What do you think, Ken? Which is it? God or man?
I think both science and religion are human pursuits at at seeking clarity, understanding, greater knowledge. Where I get a little bit hesitant is with the word wisdom. Maybe a definition of wisdom is in order. Mine is that wisdom is applying understanding and knowledge. And but it has a greater connotation than just practical things like, okay, if I swat the fly and the fly dies, then I can do that again and I'll always be able to kill a fly. But I mean, I wouldn't categorize that so much as wisdom unless the flies are really bad, but that wisdom is a pursuit of even so much more, and that's more the realm of philosophy.
Yeah, okay.
And that there's philosophical underpinnings for both religion and science, and that there's religious underpinnings for philosophy and science. And there's some science at work with respect to religion and philosophy. So I'm a little uncomfortable dicing these up too separately.
So you kind of feel like you can't have one without the other?
No.
In your sense?
No, I mean, they're all at play all at the same time.
Okay. What do you think, Les?
What was the question?
So I said in the beginning, we kind of all have some want, whether you have a religious or science background, to pursue a greater knowledge, a greater wisdom. So then the next question I would ask, who measures that? Who measures that, wisdom, that progress? Does man measure it? Does God measure it?
Last time I asked God, he didn't answer.
Okay.
So if I'm seeking understanding or wisdom, then I think I would be the one setting the standards or giving the criteria. Humans are, by nature, inquisitive, and we want to know, and these are two different ways that we can come to know.
Okay. And do you feel that either one have more bearing than the other?
Bearing on what? My life?
Yeah.
My life personally, or a human's life?
Your life.
Define religion.
Great. Okay. So from
Can I give you an anthropologist's definition?
This is the point, though. So let's say your religious background, since it's non-existent, would be a bad example. If you were to say that I believe in something without having it in front of you, or some empirical sense data, how do you make sense of that?
I don't.
You leave it be.
If it is even theoretically unobtainable, you can't check your answer, then any answer would do.
Okay. What do you think, Dave?
What's the question? First of all, Bible-believing Christians don't believe that theirs is a religion. They believe that theirs is a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. So it's a difficult question because a lot of evangelicals comprise the largest single religious group in America. And when they don't even define themselves as religious, I wonder how germane the question is.
Good answer. That's not bad at all. What do you think about that, Ken? Do you think that we really are like the largest, since Christians don't claim to be this religious mass, as Dave says? Let's check on the fact checker.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, sociologically, we could talk a lot about what's an evangelical versus what some describe as a mainline denominational Christian versus a Roman Catholic Christian versus an Orthodox Christian. This religious person, while I would say that Christians' pursuit is certainly a personal relationship with God, that it's not simply that it's so much more. Because I define religion as ultimate commitment. And in that sense, everybody has an ultimate commitment. And everyone has then religious expression. What it is that you're ultimately committed to pursuing. It sounds like Les wants to be able to quantify, or at least have established for him something in a scientific way. Otherwise, it's just kind of a waste of time.
Just guesswork.
It's just guesswork. When I think about my love life, Definitely just guesswork.
How do you quantify love? I mean, can science
Yes.
do love for us?
Yes.
All right, then I'm going to defer.
Can it? That's
Not that I know anything about neurobiology, because I don't. But there's more and more neuroanthropologists looking for neural correlates with emotions and feelings. They found this chemical oxytocin, which is this bonding chemical that gets released when mothers are with their infants, and it allows them to be more bonding and more open to nurturing. So we're looking for it. We're looking for chemical correlates of emotion and possibly love. But again, you'd have to define love. Is it that first couple of weeks feeling, when you're freaking crazy and your brain's not working? Or is it 30 years down the road and you have this commitment and understanding of each other? So you'd have to define love too.
Well, Dave, that might open up well for you. What do you think about strange long-term commitments?
to catch that fireball.
But do you think that there's a way to test levels of love in the brain?
What does this have to do with religion and science?
Well, the loving of God is kind of the only real, I feel, connection that they really want us
What
to
about
point out.
loving people? Is that simply a scientific phenomenon?
Is it? What do we do when we love people? Is it for something? Is it because of something? Ken?
Well, you're asking me.
Yes.
Well, and going back to something that Les said that I think helps us unpack maybe this particular part of it, that humans are the ones that set the standard because we're the ones in the cosmos who can attain wisdom, knowledge, and understanding unlike any other creature in the cosmos. But do we get that from ourselves only? The reason I bring that up, or why am I bringing this up, I ask myself. And the reason I do is because I think there are things that we cannot set for ourselves. Perhaps tonight's little exercise in American Republican democracy is an expression of that. I'm Canadian, so I don't know why you guys don't have a queen, but it's a lot simpler. And she's cuter. But there are things that we don't find, but that find us. That is to say, why is it that all humans are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable human rights? Is that true? And if that's true, did we come up with that? And if we came up with that, then is it true? Because what if there's a society, let's call it a Soviet Union, that says not all citizens have inalienable human rights? Is that wrong? And,
But it sounds to me like you are saying man would measure those things.
we measure them, but we receive them. And I prefer the word humanity.
Let's be more modern here.
All right, I'll just...
Humankind. Women. We'll just say women from now on. You'll get it. So I guess then my problem there is I keep on looking at this verify word. How do you verify that?
I guess, can humans set a standard that what if humans set a standard that offends us?
Well, usually there's a war or
Right.
a genocide.
Sure. So, but is there ever a right or a wrong, or is it just simply a question of whoever has the power to assert what standard they select?
This is a good time to transition. So, ideals. I kind of feel like he's falling on this. We all have, I really feel, a wide range of ideals around the world. If you step over into an Eastern culture and you start wanting to think like you did over here, it's just not going to work. You're going to run into a lot of translation errors. You're going to run into a lot of things that you would normally think would be the way, and you might offend somebody. So I guess, let me ask Les this. Dr. Miller. I have to say it like that. I feel like there should be like this dun-dun-dun every time I say it, but I don't have the horns, guys. But so do you think that throughout time, humans have found this way of using each other and this has somehow compounded the ideals that we have today? Or was there some type of original way that we maybe interpreted it from God and said, well, this is what the divine right is supposed to be. This is the moral code. This is how we have to live. Or did it just build up from maybe someone found a shiny rock, they showed it to the other guy, and he really wanted that shiny rock. He said no, and he became the leader of a small tribe. Who knows? What do you think?
So are you asking where ethics came from?
Yeah,
or-
and a long-winded question. Where did ethics, and I guess, does ethics guide our conduct, like our ideals? Does it craft our ideals, or is there some other thing we don't know about that crafts our ideals, the way we live?
Obviously, our beliefs about what is right and wrong are going to be what guides our actions. So you must be asking...
Well, right or wrong then. So if in the beginning, whenever
what?
someone
The
decided
universe?
there was a first right, so like, we drive on the right side of the road, not to play on the word right, but that's the right way, you know? Why? Why the right side of the road? Or Walmart's
We
the
can
best
answer that
because it's
question,
easy.
actually.
Okay.
So do you want to ask, let me try to help.
Go ahead, Dave.
Are you trying to ask, do we all have an innate, instinctive consciousness put there by God? Or is it something that just evolved humanly? Do we all have a moral sense because God put a conscience in us, like Paul claims in the book of Romans? Or, he says, for God made it plain to them, all of the human race. Or, how's it work? Humanity? That was a new word. I've never heard that. It's fantastic. Is that put there, or is that just evolved anthropologically? Hello?
Well,
that was a slow.
Should we argue first, though, if there is that shared innate sense? Is there one?
Well, yeah, but Batchelder, what do you think about this? Do you think that it's shared, or do you think it's a combination? Is it one or the other?
This idea of right and wrong and ethics, I think, in my opinion, evolved because humans are the most social of all primates. We are primates. We're very social primates.
Define social. I mean, elk are very social. They chatter, they hang out together.
They are social.
They run, have sex, and defecate at 8 miles an hour all together. They're really fantastic. So what do you mean by that kind of claim? That claim that we are so special as a species.
I didn't say that.
You said most social.
Yes.
That's a claim, I believe.
It is a
Last
claim.
I checked.
I preface that by saying, in my opinion, we
Okay.
are the most social primates. You can't argue we are primates. And being social animals, we have to find ways of getting along. We have to make things work. We have to cooperate with each other.
Do we, though?
Do dogs commit genocide, mass murder? Do wolf packs?
They don't love deeply enough to hurt
That's
anybody.
right. They don't want to show the other the right way. And
No, but
Yes.
what we have seen warfare in other primates, chimps in particular, chimps have war and do battles and things like
Have
that.
they found the WMDs?
But again, I'm not saying just because we're social animals we do everything right. But we do search for ways to cooperate, to create safety for our group. And again, this is in-group, out-group also arises when you have social behavior. My group is more important than your group, and I'm going to do whatever it takes for my group to survive, even at the cost of your group. That happens. So I believe these laws or these ideas, these feelings of right and wrong, have just grown out of being social animals, and they're hardwired into us. And we react in different ways, some more so, some less so, some more cooperative, some less cooperative, some more assuring the survival of my in-group at the cost of other groups than others. There's a lot of variation.
So I guess in learning to get along, did we also learn to dominate, to trick people into thinking maybe that we're getting along when in fact we're getting ahead somehow?
Well, when you have a social group, a lot of times there's leaders. Even in dogs, in elk, there's an alpha male. And that alpha male wants what he has, right? And doesn't want to give it up. So, yeah, that stuff happens.
Ken, what would you say then? A lot of people would argue against pastors on a level of, I feel like I had this one pastor one time. He was great. He connected with me, and then I went to this new church, and I really felt like he was just trying to control my thoughts. And why do so many people who aren't involved with the church it seems like they immediately go to, well, those guys are just trying to indoctrinate you, make you stupid, believe what they say, take your money. What would you say to them? Are you controlling them? Are you trying to guide them? Is God doing something for them that they couldn't get otherwise?
There's certainly a human tendency that goes beyond, that can happen in any grouping, where people are so compelled by what they deeply believe, their ultimate commitment, that they, in their zeal, they try to ram it down other people's throats. And the reason that's repugnant to us is because it's a violation of the human soul. The fact that somebody is a fellow human being means that they have rationality, they have competence, and that they need to exercise their own will as well. And violating that is a grievous crime. That's why brainwashing is a terrible thing.
So I feel like you.
Now, I think I said what I said in part to avoid your question, so let me not avoid it. Well, it's because it's happened. There have been Christian groups who have certainly been of a mind that it was more important for them to force or coerce people into sharing what it is they ultimately are committed to than it is to reason with them and to work on a level that other creatures don't. I'm with Greg in saying that we're the most social because I've never seen another creature group do something like this. And tonight is evidence that human creatures are certainly the most advanced in terms of rationality and dialogue. And
I threatened my students with an F if they didn't come. I think that's coercion.
I did that to my Caprock students too. There's two of them here tonight.
So I guess, I don't feel like you should have to avoid that question. I feel like we should all understand that science created a way to get rid of way more people way faster than any dictator or anybody saying that that's what has to happen. Sure, we may have had witches hung and this and that, and it all was terrible. How could they do that? But I mean, we're talking about like a fraction of the people died over Christianity compared to like the atom bomb.
Well,
I don't feel like you should have to avoid that question, I guess. Why do you feel
I
like
don't
you
want to
should
avoid it. I mean, if you look at human history, as each century comes and goes, it seems that each century has a greater degree of mass murder than the one prior to it, and some of...
So we're getting better?
Well,
murdering?
Closer to God.
There's certainly an increase in the capacity of the human race to do evil on unspeakable levels and on a level never imagined before. But there's also that capacity for good. The internet. I mean, that's
there are
to
so
be
many
connected, to play bridge with somebody in Australia. My grandmother would have never dreamed that was possible. When she left the Netherlands and came to Canada, she thought she'd never see her siblings ever again.
But
it was the worst thing in her life. And now, you can face chat with somebody across the world. That's a great thing that's relatively new, but so is in the history of the world nuclear fusion. I'm not a scientist, but the atom bomb. We can kill people now like never before. We can destroy our world 15 times over with the push of a few buttons. So the capacity for both good and evil has increased exponentially. And it just makes me wonder what's to come. Einstein said the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So I don't think we can avoid the challenge of, but I mean, I just use the language of right and wrong. I'm assuming that there's a right and a wrong. Where do we get the idea that there is a right and wrong? Is it just a social construction? Because if it's just a social construction, ought not other civilization and people groups, and perhaps even smaller groups, have the freedom to construct their own morality with the result that they can decide that all Jewish people need to be annihilated?
Not if the human being itself becomes the standard against which we measure.
But, okay, can I get you on that?
Sure.
Because that's what you said in response to the question, who's the measure of all things? And you said humans set the standards.
For their knowledge. If I have certain knowledge or understanding, I'm the one who would determine that, not somebody else.
But you could rationally, and let's not even resort to the word morally, but just say rightly, and you have the right to set a standard by which you as a leader in a particular societal grouping can eliminate the existence of another race.
No,
Why not?
because if humans are the standard, that is, they are inviolable, they have we say they have certain rights, certain things we do not do because it is maladaptive or not good for a human being, then that's our standard. So being able to say, well, you're short, so you can go die, and then have them killed is not good.
But where did you get that idea from? Who determines what is harm? Who determines who is human? And where does that idea come from that we ought not harm other human beings? Dogs harm each other.
Oh, just because we can't know in every particular instance doesn't mean that there isn't a distinction to be made. I mean, we do distinguish between people with developmental disabilities versus somebody who doesn't. How do you determine? What scale do you use? What particular number of which scale? But we still can make distinctions between those. So we sometimes get it wrong, we sometimes get it right, but that's what science is. We do something, we check, verify, change what we're doing, try it again. But it's pretty simple to know that if I stab a knife into the side of your head, as a human being, that's not going to be a good thing.
But what if it's good for you?
But we are social animals.
Well, you just stuck a knife in my head. How can you? No, I mean, I'm being a little facetious, but the reason I appeal to how standards do have to come from outside of human beings is because if left to our own standards, human history seems to teach that humans don't do well when they ignore standards that come from outside of them, moral codes or standards. All the great civilizations
Can you back that up, Batchelder?
have had moral standards and obligations brought to them by religion. Is that
Which got them from philosophy.
going to rock the house?
I think, going back, the first evidence we see of any kind of religious behavior among human beings was about 40,000 years ago. We've been around longer than that, by at least 100,000 years.
What's the evidence for that?
Fossils?
Fossils show religious behavior?
For humans? No, we start seeing the cave paintings at La Croix.
It's hard to say whether the cave paintings at La Croix were religious or maybe just really cool abstract art.
The first evidence, I didn't say proof, we got the first evidence of what might be religious behavior showing up 30, 40,000 years ago. We were around for at least 100,000 years before that and seem to have made it to that point, without religion.
But that's so speculative. I mean, to say that, we existed as humans, a lot of things are going undefined here. So there's a lot of latitude and a lot of abstraction.
You mean the meaning of a word is important?
What's that?
The meaning of a word is important?
No, not at all.
What is?
It depends.
It's just that to say that we as human beings, as per se, existed for 100,000 years, and we weren't religious, and then all of a sudden we were religious because we have cave paintings at Altamira or Lascaux or other places, or Venus figurines, or other things that anthropologists love to point to.
Burials.
How do you know burial mounds? Awesome. How about they just wanted to put the bones in place so they didn't rot? How about we had a monetary exchange that were Venus figurines? How about we just liked the kind of art, or somebody liked the kind of art? Maybe they're not even us. Maybe there's something completely different.
Alien astronauts.
Alien astronauts.
Yeah, you read that book too? So it's how are you defining religious behavior? I'm just curious.
How do I define religious behavior?
Yeah, I think we ought to. I would really be curious what we're talking about.
Shouldn't I ask that question a while ago?
I would say
You and your definitions. Go ahead. Go ahead, Craig.
Well, what if we agreed that religious behavior is that which exhibits or demonstrates what a person or people are ultimately committed to? So why bury bones? Why not let them rot? I mean, give the dogs something to chew on. Apparently, people historically have always valued even dead humans to an extent.
Or is it living forever? The idea.
Is there this thirst or idea inside everybody that there's got to be more than just
Okay, let's
you eat, you die, you pay tax. Well, first you pay the taxes, then you die.
let's talk about Paul Tillich, because he's
Yeah,
the
well,
guy
now you guys
come
go
up
with-
with ultimate concern.
Yeah, are you guys okay with
Religion
that?
is a subject of ultimate current concern. This is the guy who taught Columbia University in the 50s and 60s, and the mayor of Aspen, Bill Sterling, actually went to Union Theological Seminary, and where I'm from is Aspen, and so he studied at one point, and so he studied with Tillich, and it was, we've talked about this a lot, and it's like really ultimate concern. That's really what religion is. Is that going to fly in the East, in Eastern faiths and practices and whole other world where it's a complex of everyday life and practice and part of community, and it's a part of spirituality and all kinds of things. But to say that it's one single ultimate concern is so Western, so Judeo-Christian, I don't think it really fits in a larger paradigm of what religion is. So I'm saying, or asking, what is religion? Do we even know what it is? Is somebody in here tell me what it is? I've been studying it my whole life, and I still don't know what religion is. Help me out.
Well, Dave, what are the Buddhists? Your belief. What's the Buddhist ultimate concern? Isn't it that you should
Nothingness. It's
right.
nirvana. Or
No, it is not.
Buddhism by
Well, there's
default.
so many forms of Buddhism. This is going to get messy
Yeah,
really
there's only
quickly.
one real Buddhism.
Okay, thank you. Enlighten us.
Well, I mean, what is science?
Okay, there
Touche.
we go. What is science?
The explanation of natural phenomena by means of other natural phenomena. That's science.
So, what about, I'm Canadian, what about the Northern Lights? We don't have an explanation for that. So is that outside of science?
No, funny phenomenon.
Well, you guys do, but we don't in Canada. No, but there's a lot of theory involved in that.
No, not really. That's pretty well figured out.
Well, okay, let me say it this way. Science requires certain preconceptions, right? For instance, carbon dating. In order to date how old something is, we have to make a few assumptions. One of which is that the carbon has been breaking down at a similar. And pardon me, I'm not a scientist, so when I'm wrong, do it. You guys are doing it. Interrupt me. But there are some assumptions that in carbon dating, that carbon has been breaking down consistently over time.
Actually, we use that as a basic assumption, but we look towards the oldest living thing we can find to tell us how the rate has changed.
Okay.
Quite recently, we found something, 500 to 1,000 years older than we'd previously known before, and effectively readjusted the entire carbon dating scale based on that new information.
So I'm going to go ahead and jump in here real quick and say that whether it's science or religion, I feel like it's all words. Just words. I mean, you can bend or sway these words in whatever way you want to, but whether we believe in science or believe in God, it's entirely about the wording.
God is not just a word.
Well, it's just
It's the
fill it
special
in,
word.
fill in the blank. I feel like I can ask. I'm pragmatism right now. I'm in this with Dr. Miller, and we've asked what is truth, and you fumble around for really what is that capital T truth? What is the truth? And no matter how hard you search for it, you're just going to define a moving truth all the time. Why? Why can we not just get it, even with science, empirically? Whether we like the clock analogy. We know that a clock is round. We know that it'll tell us time, but do we really know the clock? You know, I don't think that unless I tried to blow this out of the discussion even in class, and I realized, you know, even if you know how to take it apart and stuff, you still don't clock. It's still a word. So if we know how it's going to articulate, maybe we find some 500,000-year-old thing, whatever. We're still just applying something that works, right?
Yes.
I mean, so what if?
Well, can I throw a bomb on this? Well,
Is it a bomb?
You can call it what you want. If you look at, and maybe it's because I'm sort of a historian too, but if you compare the great civilizations, or let's just say civilizations that we make note of because they lasted a while, whether they were great or not, and you compare how things went for the rank and file, for ordinary people like us. Compare societies that were founded on the basic premise that there is some kind of a creator that has demands on the creator's creatures, with a society that says there is no creator, there is no God, and so we just set things up for ourselves. And to me, the most profound expression in modern life of a society that said there is a creator, and that creator's demand is that all people have to treat each other with a degree of sacred respect because there's certain things that are inalienable. And then you have another civilization that says there is no God. The state will function as the supreme arbiter of all things.
See, well, okay, I'm going to interrupt and say
so
words.
Well, okay, all that to say, compare living in the United States and compare living in the Soviet Union, who had very radically different...
But that's a pretty ethnocentric comparison. If you're in the Soviet Union, you might be... F-bomb there, everyone. Sure. But it might be the case.
But, and there's also, you got.
Where would you prefer to live?
There was a lot of people in the Soviet Union that still believed in God. It wasn't a godless nation, like nobody that lived there.
Well, I'm referring to the governing structure and the nation state.
Well, if you're a Native American, if you're black, if you're an undocumented worker, you're not going to agree with that remark. Chances are, possibly, you are if you're white, upper class.
But let's do the science.
You're going to say, okay, America is a great place, but you know, whether you're an illegal or you're of an ethnicity and there's prejudice against you and you've gone through that whole socioeconomic horror show in this country, that is such a myopic view of the United States.
Well, let's not be myopic or let's not add any values. Let's just do numbers. Les, you're a numbers guy.
No, I'm not.
How many people died at the state's hand in the Soviet Empire compared to the U.S.
57,482,212.
Okay, at least. Yeah, that was probably just the Ukrainians.
Yes.
How are we doing in this empire?
Well, being that we write history, it sounds
die
really
of starvation every day.
Well, has the United States as a nation state killed more than 60 million people?
Give us
under so-called rule of law. Have we done that yet? And our course of history is what? 228 or more years. Soviet Union lasted about 75. Do the math. Let's just do the science. In which place would you rather live in based on numbers? Now, is this just a happenstance? Is this just something that evolved? Or do ideas and religious presuppositions matter?
Okay, why don't you just go ahead and compare us to Sweden or Thailand or Canada? I mean, why the Soviet Union? And they threw off their former system, which was atheistic. So, are we working at proving that religion is somehow better politically?
Well, let me ask Batchelder, what do you think about that? I feel like you might have something to say.
It's hard for me to buy into that argument because
throughout history, you guys probably know this better than me, I'm not a historian or an anthropologist, but there's been plenty of cultures and political systems that were very religious, that were based on God, that were practicing human sacrifice and killing people by the thousands. So I don't feel that comparing, the United States as this wonderful place, which it is. I feel it is. There's still been a lot of injustice done, but there's been systems throughout history and throughout the world that definitely believe in gods that have done lots of killing.
Look at the Aztecs.
Yeah.
I'm just talking, I don't want to attach value. I just want to do numbers. Let's just talk numbers. And how has it gone for godless nation states devoted to atheism compared to nation states? And let's just stick in the modern world then, because, nation statism is relatively new, maybe 300-400 years ago. Old. Let's just compare nation states that are committed to godlessness and nation states that are committed to the idea that there is a God and therefore there are. On what basis are there inalienable human rights?
So, okay, maybe I want to just jump, because we're kind of narrowing down on this hour.
Sorry to...
No, you're bringing up kind of the last thing. I think what it really starts to come down to for every single one of us is we are born into some type of order, whether we acknowledge it or we're anarchists or we watch YouTube videos on how to make homemade, whatever. You still are born into this structure, this system. So do you think we need it? Do we need order? Do we need God? I feel like that's kind of excusing numbers and excusing values is kind of impossible at the same time. So you can't really look at someone and say, well, let's look at the numbers and ask them to value and not value. They're going to look, okay, so 30 people, 50 people, that's really not going to come from them and what they think. They were born into something. They learned how to think. They took the steps. Great. Is that necessary? Do we need order? What would it mean if we got rid of it? Do we need God to assign order?
Define order.
So like we're all in here right now, everyone in the audience, without me telling them, please be quiet the entire time, knows to be quiet the entire time.
So rules of behavior?
Kind of, yeah. I feel like that's an order.
Did that rule come from God?
Not asking that. Do we need it? Whether or not you're religious or scientific, is order necessary?
Let's just talk DNA. Your DNA has to have a certain order to it, right? I'm not a biologist, but if it doesn't, you don't really live or do anything. Or
you can swim really deeply in the water.
Why? Yeah. But we see order all over the place, and actually, doesn't difficulty come from disorder?
So it is chaos too. Chaos day.
Can we live?
Is it chaos or is it order?
Well, we were just talking about this afternoon.
Well, your words come in this nice order that I can understand.
What order is that?
His order.
Some verb object. But I can put any words I want to in that order. So, does the order matter?
Green car, baby chainsaw.
Green car, baby chainsaw.
How do you do that? Do you memorize that stuff before? Let's say I'm going to have to memorize something completely absurd. So, green baby chainsaw. I can see that. I got a green baby with a chainsaw in his hand. It's working for me. It's funny that for Christians who believe in total depravity or original sin, so often argue for order in a world that Paul says is completely fallen. And I always find that somehow deeply ironic that when Paul says that all of creation is fallen and the sons of man, nature groans with the sons of men for redemption. It's like, and then Christians who say they believe in the Bible and follow the teachings of Paul then turn around and argue for like an ordered universe when it seems like at the heart of the New Testament is this kind of cry that all of creation has fallen along with humankind. I don't want to, make your argument, Ken. But it just seems like, why is that? I'm just curious. Why does that always seem to go on?
In describing the creation and humans as the primary creature in it, and the fallen reality, the analogy I've heard is it's like cancer. If a person has cancer, there's a disorder for them physically, but it doesn't, and so it's a disease that has invaded, attacked, that's at work. But it doesn't mean that the person is experiencing only chaos. There's still order. And so this is going to get really theological, but the doctrine of original sin or total depravity classically has meant that human rebellion against the idea that there is a God that has a claim to make on that God's creatures invited in the chaos that resulted. So, but it doesn't mean that things are as bad as they can possibly be. And yet, I think that Paul in the New Testament is actually describing a universal human yearning. We yearn for order. We want things to make sense. We're not comfortable when we have cognitive dissonance. We're not comfortable when we experience pain. I think philosophy, science, all human endeavors are a quest for order, for understanding, for knowledge, to get to a place that's better than where we are without it. Otherwise, why would we be here? Unless it's for these great pop-up philosophy club things.
What were you going to say, Les?
Yeah, he needs to talk.
I was going to say that you disagreed earlier when I said that man gets to be the determiner of whether we have succeeded with this or not. And then you talked about the pain of cognitive dissonance that gets alleviated. If I am feeling that and I come to understand something enough to make that go away, then I should be the one to determine that, right?
Yes, you get to be an active participant in a reality that's been placed around you. And so it's not so humans are not simply passive creatures. We're the only creature that actually gets to, like in no other way, I would argue it's not just on a social level, but it's on a cognitive, intellectual, yes, I'll use the word moral, and indeed spiritual level, engage in the reality that's around us in an effort to have a better experience in it. And as a theist, I would say that experience can only find its ultimate hope and meaning when that experience intersects with an appreciation that there is more than just that which we can measure, which is what I generally define as science. Science is that which you can measure.
So it's like a relay race. God hands the order off, and we pick it up and run with it.
Who's next?
Sure.
Okay, we're getting close to the hour. Do you guys want, I can stir this up and have them talk, or do you, who all has questions? Can I see some hands? Okay,
Don't we get to...
Get to what? Okay, so we're going to take a potty break, everyone. Come back with those questions ready.
Hey,
and
can I just say something?
Yes.
I'm teaching a class this spring, Philosophy 150. It's called, coincidentally, Religion and Science. I welcome students. Sign up for my class. I'd love to see you. The more the merrier. And we'll be talking about these things, and you can enlighten me. I always need to be more enlightened about what religion and science are, so you can help me out.
And Dr. Miller also has the exam in life next semester, so that one's really.
Because I know some of you are going to drift out at the potty break, so I just want to make
and
that.
I do have a ski pass, and I give free lessons, so I'd love to make you attract audience on a chairlift.
I give extensive reading assignments and lots of homework.
Thank you for coming. Come back after the potty break. Much more lively than the first one. Yeah.
Or you can use mine.
Order.
Chaos.
Godless people, no order.
Hello.
Yes, it's on, Dave, still.
We need order.
Okay. All right, guys. I'm going to go ahead and just walk around to a few of you. I'm going to kind of start over here. Robert has presented a good question. We're going to start with him. If you have it that someone you need to aim it at particularly, please say this is aimed at so-and-so, so they can give you their full attention. If it's aimed at everybody, just go for it.
The basis of science and religion both start on premise that cannot be proven.
Yes.
And so neither one have a theory that rises to a scientific level. So aren't they fairly similar in their inchoate or initial states?
Well, I'm just confused. You said science is without premise, and then you said so it doesn't rise to the level of being scientific. So I got confused.
What I mean by that is neither one can present a theory that can be falsifiable and rise to the level we can falsify it. And we don't know what we don't know what the origins of matter and energy.
Do you want to say verifiable or falsifiable?
I won't say falsifiable because that's scientific.
So you can't prove anything that's scientific. You can't prove it wrong. I don't follow that because that's falsifiable.
No, in science it has to be, for a theory to rise to a scientific level, it has to be falsifiable. It has to be observable, measurable, and objective, no matter who measures it.
Okay, I'm just not following because I've always thought it was verifiable. So somebody needs to help me out
Your
here.
definition of science is that it can only deal with that which is measurable?
Yes, it is measurable, but it has to present a theory that is falsifiable. And if we cannot present a theory that's falsifiable, then it's not scientific in its origins.
I think what he's saying, guys, is both science and religion, or whatever it is that you're going for, start somewhere that you can't actually test. Like the origin of it has some type of unknown. They both seem to operate on two different schools of thought, but they still have this unknown origin. They have some basics that you can't actually prove. You have to start with a belief, don't you?
You have to start wherever you are.
Yeah, well, I would answer by saying that in both disciplines, yes, you will start with some preconceived notions.
But that's not answering his question. He wants to know
some of which you
can't find that origin.
You cannot scientifically prove or disprove.
So you lump them up, and they both have the same falsifiability.
Well, I mean, origins is a really good area in which to wrestle with that question. Because scientifically, I think science demonstrates to us that stuff can't come from nothing all by itself. Is that fair? That's science. I mean, that's kind of crude science.
Or
in physics, you would say you cannot get.
Actually, I'm a junior physics major, and you can actually create matter from nothing. We actually see this process occur in fusion and fission in the cores of stars. When this process, the energy conservation theory holds true, where energy can be directly reconfigured into matter, and just as of recently, we've discovered something that gives rise to what we call the Higgs boson particle. We made a pre-assumption, and this is a really great theory because we didn't know what gives matter its mass. We had no idea. When particle physics arose, we did not know what was the defining particle that made matter have mass. But now that we have more evidence suggesting that there is a particle that carries some type of characteristic which gives matter mass. It's just like with different particle physics over, you have the strong force, which is what binds and keeps protons and neutrons together in spite of all these other forces like the electrostatic force. We know now what binds everything together. And as far as science goes, physics can't be proven. Absolutely. There is no such thing as an absolute proof to things. When you conduct a scientific experiment, you only can confirm that your theory holds true.
You want to just take a chair?
Build. So, in some ways, I guess really the nature of proving whether or not science is provable is irrelevant. You only have an understanding as to what you can observe and recreate, in any kind of scenario, or that's like in cores of stars that are type 1a supernovas, where elements are being fused together and they essentially create heavier elements. That's something we can't necessarily recreate on the planet because the fundamental forces at work are greater than what we can actually reproduce. But we have an idea as to what happens, but we can't prove it absolutely.
Lawrence Krauss actually wrote a really good book on this called Something from Nothing.
Who's the author?
Lawrence Krauss. Krauss.
What I think he's trying to say is that science is only falsifiable. We can't prove it. It's just a series of assumptions that haven't yet been shown to be false.
You guys agree, panelists?
Well, I find that fascinating that the scientific community has to deal with such questions, which are rather, in my mind, metaphysical. They're very metaphysical.
Very, indeed.
And so, to me, that demonstrates, and I hope nobody it's not science versus religion in any thoughtful Christian's book, in my mind. Both are areas in which we deal with reality. Now, the question with religion is how, but you talk about things that you can't measure or see, touch, taste, and all that stuff. But it's fascinating to me that the scientific enterprise has to deal with some pretty fundamental metaphysical questions that we can argue about whether or not they're provable or absolutely the truth. Which doesn't sound a lot different than what philosophers of religion have to contend with when they start delving into, well, where does this come from? How do we know this is true? Is it possible to know that this is true? If it's not possible to know that it's true, does that mean it can't be true? And so I would argue that making decisions and commitments based on things that you're pretty sure of, but you can't be absolutely prove, requires something called faith.
What do you think about that, Les? You think faith is their science and faith are kind of operating at the same time?
No. If faith were something for which you could have evidence, then we would just call it bad reason. Reasoning fallaciously, incorrectly, with not enough evidence. But we separate it from reason. So it's something different and special. That's why we have faith. Yes?
Well, I try not to drive a big wedge between faith and reason, because if faith isn't reasonable, it's probably not good faith.
It can be consonant with reason, and that's why we get
but I guess what I'm hearing from the doctor of physics over there, the aspiring one.
That's Mr. Hartline.
Yeah, Dr. Hartline. There's a faith aspect then to physics.
Yes.
Not in the, I don't want to use the word faith in a heavily religious overtone, but there's things that you're kind of counting on that you can't be completely certain of by your own ability to measure.
That is absolutely correct.
But that's just inductive reasoning.
Pre-assumed conditions that we don't have any way of proving, we don't have any empirical evidence really to prove at the time being. So we make assumptions to things that say, if it's under this circumstance, there might be something out there that is causing it.
So if you're religious, if you take a religious approach and you say, we know, okay, there's a reality around us. It had to come from somewhere. And it's pretty ordered and consistent. Every time I raise something up in the air, it always falls and spills coffee. Sorry, Dr. Foster, President Foster. That happens pretty much every single time. Why is that? Well, there's some scientific reasons. But what if we said, there's all this order around us. I'm going to induce...
15 seconds.
Okay. That someone's ordering it that I can't see. Because it couldn't have just all come by itself. Physics tells us that chaos cannot produce order.
Is anyone going to die out there if I move on?
I want to die.
Okay.
Do you care if we die?
We'll tie it back to the first question, about science and religion approaching the question of purpose or morals or order differently. What do you think about the argument that maybe, when previous humanity kind of found itself alone and defenseless on a dark planet, we kind of used religion as a way to create order and impose, rules and establish morals. And whereas today they may seem arcane because now thousands of years later we have a better standard of living and we understand our environment more. And science, as opposed to creating societal order, is giving us tools to actually understand our world and apply that reasoning so that we can create not necessarily a more structured and organized world, but a world that we understand more.
Can I answer that?
Sure.
Yes.
Philosophers of religion call that a reductionist argument when you say, well, religion evolved because it helps explain things, it sets things right, it creates structures of order. All of those reduce religion, the phenomenon, to something else, an explanation, or cause and effect. And that is offensive to people that are deeply religious. That's offensive to people who have walked with the Lord, who have been born again, who feel Jesus flowing in their veins. To say, well, this just kind of evolved because people sought to control other people, and so there's this hierarchy that grew up, and guys got pointy hats, and they figured out how to control, innocent people, victims. That reduces religion, the power and the mystery of it, to something else. Probably quasi-scientific, anthropological, sociological, and it doesn't really help us understand what it is in itself phenomenologically. Sorry to use a big word, but I like to use big words sometimes. and this notion of dropping a cup and proving God is just... I just left. What? Really? I wasn't really. Look, God. I got a coffee spill. That looks bad. I think God is bad. God's leaking.
Okay, here comes our next question, guys.
Now I'm offended.
Can I speak now?
Okay.
In the whole lifelong debate of science and religion, and there have been many, why is it always Christianity that is the religion in this debate? I mean, why is it not usually
Zonde witchcraft?
or Hinduism or Islam or Judaism
Green babies with chainsaws.
Zoroastrianism or sky genieism or I don't know.
What do you think, Batchelder?
What? Why?
Yeah, why is it always Christianity?
Because you're all white Americans who are, for the most part, Christian, right?
Dominant religious form, Sam. I mean,
If we were in a different cultural setting, we might be talking about that religion. But I think I wouldn't want to discount other religions throughout the world at all and just give eminence to Christianity,
even though they're wrong.
Is it fair to
even though those other religions are wrong, but we are a Christian culture for the most part, in this culture anyway. But I welcome speaking about other religious.
Is it fair to say that the reason that happens is because the advancement of science, the greatest advancements in science have taken place in cultures and societies which have largely been Christian.
Muslims.
I mean, right. If you go back further, certainly, we got our numbers from Muslim, the Islamic culture as well. But in terms of modernism, is that fair to say? And that's my answer for why it's always Christianity involved in that.
That's not a good answer.
He's a Christian, forgiven.
It's already.
Is there a dividing line between skepticism and self-indulgence?
Sounds like a philosophical question.
Self-indulgence? I don't understand your question, really. Can you relate the two for me first?
Is the skeptic really just trying to...
good question.
Try to get out of responsibility?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. We can do all sorts of things to evade our responsibilities, to pretend we don't know things, lie to ourselves. But skepticism as an epistemological position wouldn't be used that way. But individuals do, definitely.
Why wouldn't that happen on a larger level than just individual?
Because only individuals have brains.
Oh. But aren't we social creatures?
Yes.
Who do this together?
Brains, yes, but only individuals have the brains.
A concatenated brain.
Can you have a skeptics club?
Every other Tuesday.
You should know you're there.
I'm there, yeah. I think I'm there.
All right, we got one coming.
I think that's a great question. I wonder about that all the time.
The discussion today is the difference between science and religion and their roles. And I've spent a significant amount of time trying to figure out a distinction between the two different ways of knowing. And the only distinction that I can find, like for example, a religious person can talk about ethics, and a secular person can also talk about ethics. So, and you can have a secular society that lives in an ethical and moral way within that framework of doing right and not doing wrong. So the only defining feature that I find of religion is revelation. The idea that we're going to get information not from an inquiry that is peer-reviewed and etc., but the only defining feature is someone writing down some information and then telling other people that it's true because they said so. And they said it so because they talked to God themselves, and you should just believe it because. So I guess my question is, how do we distinguish the proper revelation from the improper one? Because we know that there are many incompatible revelations. How do we distinguish what is the true voice of God speaking through another human being from the voice of God speaking through somebody that's making stuff up? Because we know that someone's making it up. Otherwise, there wouldn't be all these discrepant voices out there. How do we distinguish who we're supposed to believe without thinking about it and without judging it for ourselves?
Well, you said, you sort of made an argument and then asked a question. So let's back this up a little bit. So you're saying that really both science and religion are based upon revelation? Or you're, I mean, I thought you
No, that's the distinguishing feature. Science allows the community to come decide.
Okay, let's go
come
back to
together and test.
forms of knowing. Okay? And let's say one's revelatory, religion. Well, Immanuel Kant writes the Critique of Pure Reason to define what the secure path of science is. And he names it's things that are empirical of the five senses, and they're also verifiable through experience, shared experience, based upon his knowledge of Newtonian law, which was space-time continuum. which is now, Einstein screwed all that up for everybody. But we were good with Newton. So those things, space and time, and of the five senses, observable, experienceable, that's where knowledge comes from. So that distinction that Kant made, the reason why he's such a huge name, not just in philosophy, but in all of academics and all knowledges and fields of inquiry, is because he drove a wedge in the heart of knowing and split metaphysics and theology, religion, on one side, and science on the other, based upon revelation versus empiricism. So that's a quick history lesson and why we have two forms of knowing.
So I guess my question was more, if we're going to accept that science and revelation are the two ways of knowing, how do we know which revelation? Isolating it from science, we understand that that's a good way of knowing things. If we accept that revelation is a way of knowing things, how do we know what is the right revelation and which one is not?
How it works for
We have to defer to Ken now.
How it works for you.
I'm so glad that Dave went first because it gave me a lot of time to think about an excellent question. The only thing, and Andy, I think you're nailing it. Andy was muttering, which one's working out for you? Which sounds awfully pragmatic. I'm with you but I would nuance it this way. Which knowledge, religious knowledge, leads to the best honoring of the human soul? So, that is to say,
What color is your soul?
that is to say, pick a religion, analyze how it treats human beings. And the one that treats human beings best might be the right one.
Jesus ended up on a cross. How did that work out for him? Oh, I'm sorry, wrong religion. That was Judaism.
So you're talking about the Jains, right? The Jains are nonviolent, respectful of every human being, respectful of animals, respectful of the environment. How is Christianity compared to the Jains? Christianity kills and gives the justification for horrible atrocities, and the Jains have never hurt anybody. And never will hurt anybody because their revelation tells them not to. So if we're going to compare them, apples to oranges, in that pragmatic way that you decided, don't the Jains come out on top?
You're good. I would also say that in order to make a good assessment, you also need to consider not its contemporary expression, but its entire historical expression.
And the Christianity's historical expression has been really bad.
To say that.
Well, and the Jains has been really good.
I think also you need to look at good for who. And in different cultures and in different times, different things have been valued. So good for who? At the time of the Crusades, well, that was good for them, wasn't it? Good for who? And that's going to vary.
Donald Rumsfeld said pacifism in a time of war is treason. That's what I'd say to the Jains.
Well, let me just add one comment, and that is this. It's easy to delineate a particular time or a particular expression, but to look at a religion in its largest totality. So if you look at the history of the world, of the major religions that have had a significant influence on a civilization or a society, look at those. And as a Christian, I would appeal to hospitals as an expression of Christians saying those who are vulnerable and weak and dying need to be afforded sacred care.
Ken,
yeah.
we're gonna
okay, so we'll start on hospitals.
Plus, that probably brought up a lot of questions, the hospital thing. So,
go ahead.
Well, with all the knowledge that we've been gaining throughout the years and centuries and so on and so forth, have you guys ever thought about that we're actually just learning how God created us, the universe, and everything else of that sort? What do you guys think about that?
It's very hopeful.
Yeah, it is.
I think
Us as humans, we're just figuring out, hey, did it this way.
It's just,
Cool.
yeah, we're just beginning to appreciate what's really going on around us.
I think that could be said from whatever perspective.
Nietzsche said hope is the last cry of the slave class.
But Nietzsche also said, we should consider every day lost which we haven't danced. I mean, let's kind of consider. He probably had some fun things going on too. Not all of it.
Sure, but it wasn't all about hope.
Yeah,
It was
just
just
depended on
having fun, right?
Maybe someone put him down really bad that day.
That's all I get from you guys?
Well, it seems like in order to answer your question, you'd have to believe in God to start with, right?
I just wanted to know what you guys thought about it, so that's all. It was kind of.
But no, that's a good point though, because that does. You would have to, for that question to ensue, you have to first acknowledge the belief in God.
Haven't more and more scientists began to acknowledge, maybe not necessarily a God, or you get into secular different religions, but the presence of a being that created everything in general? Because going back to what he said in physics and everything, and this particle that they found that is undisputable by scientific standards, but then, and ironically nicknamed the God particle. They still, where are the origins of that particle? These stars can create it, but what created those stars? So science doesn't really have an explanation for the origin, and I think that's where you get down to the biggest difference in what is religion versus what is science, is the origin of everything that's around us. And more science is beginning to accept that something created everything. Because something from nothing is just as absurd as something from a being. Like the Big Bang Theory, how is that any better than somebody saying, a god made this, or nothing made this?
They've moved to the Big Bang.
Actually, it's no longer the Big Bang, it's just
I like
the Bang.
that.
The Bang.
I do.
Yeah, I'm with you too. That's where I am.
Intelligent thing said all that.
Okay, we got a question here.
To go off the gray dude's, what he said or asked, you.
I like that.
What do you guys think about, since I think that we're kind of humanity, at least the Western civilization, especially the northern countries like Norway, Sweden, Iceland, have kind of been not outgrowing spirituality and religion, but kind of moving past the organized aspect of it. And they're kind of, as far as I know, they're the most atheistic countries in the world. And they're also they have the highest living standards, the best education, the best healthcare. They're taller than us right now. Basically.
Better looking.
Which is very important.
I think they're socialists.
Well, it's working for them, so. Anyways, but I see humanity going in that trend, or at least Western civilization. So, with that in mind, if humanity is outgrowing organized religion, in which way do we find out right from wrong? How do we discover morality? And is it possible to use the scientific method to discover that morality?
Who wants to tackle?
Go ahead. Well, can I just throw out a bad case example or an awful situation? Which country was that where that guy shot up all those kids at that political camp? Was that Norway or was that Denmark?
Norway.
Was it Norway? So how do Norwegians go about prosecuting that case and determining to what extent it was wrong and then what consequence is appropriate for it? without some kind of a heritage of considering life sacred, which requires some kind of a religious commitment, whether it's organized or not.
I don't buy that. Just because the standard isn't God doesn't mean that there isn't a standard.
Well, I'm not even going to use the word God, but there must be some ultimate commitment to life as inviolable, inviolatable, or that you cannot take someone else's life. Scandinavians are inheritors of that tradition, wherever that comes from. But why?
Norse religions, Vikings.
Like, well, my question is why? How are we going to say that what that guy did was wrong? On what basis? And I know the basis. It's because humans shouldn't be killed. But why shouldn't we kill human beings? Especially if we don't like their political stripes. Who decided and why?
We did.
So
human beings.
So that we can live together.
But then if we keep evolving, is it possible for us to then to evolve to a point where we say, maybe there's a super people, and that only those people are worthy of living in this world, and that those who are less than human, like Slavs or Gypsies or homosexuals or the deaf or Jews or short people, or let's throw in the Norwegians while we're at it. But I mean that sincerely. On what basis do we? And I always go back to this because in my assessment, the Nazi experiment in developing a civilization that was supposed to last at least 1,000 years was abysmal in its treatment of human beings. Because, and this my belief is, because they lost a sense that all human life is sacred. So, in Norway, if they let go of their traditional heritage that life is sacred for religious reasons, then what will underpin their societies guarding children at a camp from being killed by another person? So all that to say, I need, whether it's scientific, ethical, political, or mathematical, I don't care. But give me a reason to trust that if I send my children to school in Norway, that the government there will do what it can to ensure my kids' safety. And on what basis? I mean, I know that.
I'm going to move to Mike here, because this is getting kind of crazy. We have like 4 or 5 people left. If you don't mind, Ken. Okay. Mike, you ready to go here?
Yeah, we're ready to go. Been ready to go for a while. Okay, I'm in Dr. Miller's pragmatism class.
You cannot blame that on me.
This question is mostly for Dr. Miller. If it embarrasses him, I hope so. Probably not, but we'll try. Or for the whole panel. In your pragmatism class, we're talking about practical applications of certain theories or ideas that we hold in our mind. And that the basis of the pragmatism is that as far as one's daily life and applications in it, you can really assess the validity of something based on its practical use, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So what I really want to know is who's on what side. Can we explore the question of what practical value or maladaptive detriment does belief in a power greater than yourself hold for a person's daily life?
Oh, we'll get there when we start reading the ethics of belief.
Oh.
Gee, come on.
Is that really what you're going to give him?
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
well,
what's the exam answer?
The exam answer. What was your question again?
Practical value of believing in a higher power.
Oh, if it works and you are successful in doing whatever you're trying to do, then that's fine. It's true. Let's see. What sorts of things, practical benefits would people get out of believing in a higher power? The belief that the universe is a good place. Some people get the belief that it's a bad place. Both of those then help them decide how they're going to live, who they're going to live with, what standards they should take, and so on. So it would dramatically affect your life whether or not you believe that there was a God to give you these and this sort of world or not. It could. It doesn't have to, but it could. in all of those different ways. Gives you someplace to go at Christmas, right?
Does that satisfy you, Mike?
I guess. I think that using pragmatism as a standard for religion is short-sighted, because so much of what religion does has nothing to do with what is practical. Is self-sacrifice practical? Is forgiveness practical? Is grace practical? It just doesn't even have any application. There's no traction in questions of religion. Furthermore, there are other problems philosophically with pragmatism, because genius is not pragmatic. Like, was Van Gogh pragmatic when he painted Starry, Starry Night? The guy was poor. He was destitute. He was unrecognized in his age. Was Mozart? He died a pauper in a grave for poor people. How horrible, especially in America. Oh, it wasn't America, sorry. So, why do we have this standard of all things practical for religion, science, art, beauty? Practical? Really?
Are you asking me?
Those are all your pragmatism students in my class afterwards. Right?
You have to respond.
Do you want me to respond to him?
So this is outside the realm of this debate, isn't it? I mean,
Rather than use the word practical, what if we just use the word good? Okay. I mean,
oh, that's easy.
Go ahead. Go just ask me a question.
Okay. So I would first like to touch on how Ken keeps referring to the United States of America being religion, like Christian-based, when we were actually founded on the idea that we are not going to be religion-based at all. So like to throw that your way. Also, you keep touching on the sanctity of life when, this might not be true, but having been brought up in a Christian home, I was always taught that life doesn't really matter like half as much as afterlife. That's not what you're working towards. You're working towards your afterlife. So where is this sanctity of life coming from? Like, why would it matter if we're killing people who are Christian because they get to go to heaven no matter what, right? Like, I don't understand. You're kind of contradicting yourself a little bit, and so I just need some clarification. I'm not trying to badger you because.
Yeah. And please don't kill me either, but I'd like to go to the party after. Let's talk first about your first question is, what about the foundation of this nation state with respect to religion, and wasn't there a concerted effort to separate religion from the entity of the nation state? A historian's going to answer that question better in terms of what was the expectation of the founding fathers with respect to religion and its role in public life. But the U.S. Constitution does say all, and I think it says men, but I think now we would nuance that to all people, have been endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable human rights.
That being mom and dad. That's who made me.
Well, is the fact that but I don't think parents can delineate, first of all then, what are inalienable human rights? If your parents are your Creator, can they kill you? Of course they can. Although they did in Rome. Well, the dad did, but. So all that to say, there is some kind of a theistic foundation in this culture. How we play that out and how that plays out today is obviously a big topic. But whether or not it was a Christian foundation or a Judeo-Christian one, or there's arguments that it was deism, but the founding fathers did say that the basis for people having rights that can't be violated is because they were granted them by the Creator.
Like a Creator, not the Creator. I think that they're different.
I'm just quoting the Constitution. I mean, I'm kind of ignorant, but it isn't the
Well, it
Constitution.
came from Locke, too.
So I find that fascinating as a Canadian, in all seriousness, because Canada does not have a constitution with that language in it, and we have a whole different system. The sanctity of life one. The reason I bring that up, and I think it ties in with that constitutional statement, that preamble. I think one inalienable human right is the right to life, and the UN has said that. But it's not as if before the UN said that right didn't exist. And it's not as if before the founding fathers wrote that in the Constitution, that it's not like inalienable human rights all of a sudden happened, but it was humans recognizing something that they did not come up with on their own. And that goes back to the earlier question about the nature of science and religion, the difference being that on the basis of that which gets revealed versus that which is measured.
Are you satisfied with that? Okay.
We're going to move on to our next question. We're kind of narrowing down on time. Can I have a show of hands of people who really want to fire off? So we might go a few minutes over. Is everyone okay if we go a few minutes over? Yeah. If you have to go, it's really okay. You know, we're not going to hold it against you if you go off the door. But here we go. We'll get through you guys. Everyone okay with it?
Well, my question is, how is science not a religion, or is science becoming a religion?
How do you define religion?
So, Garrett, ask that question again, okay?
Well, how is science not a religion? I think a lot of people, maybe science is evolving to something that people prescribe to as a religion.
Because it's based upon verifiable evidence. Excuse me, I'm not going to say falsifiable. So, and by verifiable, it means that we can go back over and over again and show that something is true.
Oh, replicable.
Yes.
A lot of people subscribe to things that, like we had the Big Bang Theory mentioned earlier, that these aren't necessarily things that we can know are true.
No, and those are theories, and they're presented. I'm going to disagree with our friend in the fourth row and say that astrophysics presents those as theories, not as fact. And so, that at the outer reaches of quantum and cosmology, those are theoretical constructions to attempt to explain things that have not yet been verifiable by any observable means yet, which we had a discussion earlier. That becomes almost a form of engineering at some point and no longer physics. But so I think the key, just to try to make this simple, is science is defined on things that can be repeated over and over again so that everybody can agree. Does that work for you?
Well, I think there's two elements of science.
She's going to fill in a part of time.
You're all very good. So I'm trying to understand also the scientific theory and how we're defining things. Because as I understand scientific theory to say nothing is actually verifiable. To decide something is true cannot be done by science. It's only shown over and over again to be consistent. And so you keep your theory and you hold your theory and you can put faith in that theory because it's consistent as far as observation goes.
Let's say trust.
Trust,
Yeah.
sure. But I think that my point is that really faith and trust are the same thing. And so in religion and in science, we are using the same, we're not using the same terminology, but we're really talking about the same thing. So I need to understand where we're coming from with the definition of, whether we can know something out of science. That doesn't fit with my understanding of scientific theory.
Do you have a response, man?
Yeah, my question relates to the faith question. Can you
Do you have a question or a response to this part?
It's a question related to that. So.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, can each of you in a brief response tell us what you have faith in, starting with this professor right here?
What I have faith in?
Yeah, I want to hear each in a brief response.
What I have faith in?
Yeah.
I don't know that I have faith in a lot of things.
Okay. Next.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you're getting at there.
All right, we got, do you have a response? Go for it.
Just a brief response.
Beyond that?
Yeah, I do. It won't surprise you. But I also want to know if we've addressed that earlier question as well. I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
About science. My faith is in a God who has revealed himself through a being named Jesus Christ, who was fully God and fully human, so that we could have a reunification with the one who created us and seeks community forever.
Okay. I don't. I see faith as belief in something for no reason, something for which there can be no justification. If there is evidence and justification, then it's just inductive reasoning. So it would be wishful thinking for me, or guessing. Okay. Dave?
I don't want to answer the question.
But what about the knowledge question in the science? It goes past me because I'm not a scientist, but I'd be interested in what exactly does science, and what's the connection between science and knowledge? Is that a fair way of summarizing that question? Do we get knowledge from science? Do we get truth from science? Fact?
What is truth? Is truth a matter of perspective?
Oh, no. This sounds like one of my classes.
Okay, before this starts off, I mean, I feel like there's some level of understanding we can't get past. You know, okay, go ahead. You got a question? All right.
All right, so my idea is that we have all these questions and all these ways that we try and believe or understand things, but really we're never going to get the answers we want or think we are going to get, because I don't think we should have the power to know that knowledge. And who does have the power to know that knowledge would be nature itself. Nature always seems to fix itself. I was wondering what you guys thought about that.
Is it fair for me to say that your God is nature?
Did you say God is nature?
Well, that your description of nature is, my understanding of your view of nature is that nature then is God.
I would say nature is all knowledge.
So, as humans, we like to put personifications on natural things that happen. You guys would probably know this better than me, but wasn't sun, the original word was Apollo, and sun meant the same thing. Daphne and moon, they meant the same thing.
Yes.
So as humans, we've always personified forces of nature and stuff. And when I hear the pastor talk, it feels to me like personifying natural forces that are at work. So that's kind of what it feels like to me. But I do feel that nature operates on its own. It follows patterns that are replicable. Sometimes crazy things happen, chaos, but I feel like it operates on its own. And I don't feel a need to personify it by calling nature God.
Well, could we say that nature is the first mover? And in being the first mover, it is the determiner of that which is to come?
I'm not really talking about back then, I'm just talking about now and how over time it fixes itself, no matter what humans or any other thing like a meteor does.
Was nature always there?
Yeah, what's the origin of your nature?
I'm not talking about the origin, I'm just talking about it now.
I think this can circle around kind of again where Garrett started. And Dave, did you have a response, I guess, to this?
Well, I was just wondering, Garrett, where you were going with that. That was interesting to me, the question that you were asking. And I know you well enough to know you were going somewhere.
I'm glad you were good. So I guess where I'm going with that is, one key element to religion, I think, is a person's like self-identification with something else. But I think that also happens in science. A lot of people, they prescribe to science or they prescribe to, any other religion. So how are the two different? And maybe it's not doesn't cut down to like a boilerplate definition of science, but maybe what science has become possibly just within our society. Does that kind of give you what you need to?
I think that's very true that Deleuze, the guy I wrote out my dissertation on, calls that conceptual persona, and it does form who we are by, I guess that's no mystery, by what we respect deeply, or what we admire, what we hold highest. And it does inform us in who we are, and it's part of how we see ourselves, whether as scientists or as Christians or as philosophers or as geologists. Garrett's a geologist. And that becomes part of who we are and how we identify ourselves. Would you agree with that, Professor Miller?
That's what James said.
Oh, back to pragmatism. It's killing me.
Well, you got tillage from there, so.
Okay.
Yeah,
Fair
the
enough.
center of our emotional energies, yeah. That was great.
Okay, we're going to have.
Oh, Mr. Carlin.
Mr. Miller?
Are you going to email me your question?
No, I'm not. One of the themes tonight is everybody's been badgering everybody else on lack of definition. So I'm going to open this with the definition of superstition.
From where?
This is Merriam-Webster.
Well, that's undeniable then.
1A, a belief or practice resulting from ignorance, fear of the unknown, trust in magic or chance, or false conception of causation.
Like the Big Bang Theory.
1B, an irrational, abject attitude of mind towards supernatural, nature, or God resulting from superstition. And 2, a notion maintained despite evidence to the contrary. The reason I bring that up, it was one of the topics that was discussed in our Critical Thinking 105 class. And if I am incorrect, please excuse my ignorance of religion, but it seems to me that it is largely based around superstition. Fear of the unknown. An afterlife. Isn't that to describe and help us cope with the fear of there being nothing for eternity?
I think that's a shallow description. I'm sorry. You know, I've just known so many people who have deeply moving conversion experiences and encounters with God on so many levels that just to say that it's, what was it? That it was superstition is, you know, it's frankly horrible to find faith in God in such terms. I don't know.
I think that's one thing we haven't really talked a lot about tonight is ecstatic, or you could say altered states of consciousness, experiences that happen in a religious context. And people in this room has probably had experiences where being born again, it's an incredible experience. You can feel it in your body, right? You have changes in perception. And that's something we haven't really talked a lot about tonight, is how these changes in perception and experiences are very tied to religion and tied to certain parts of the brains that are being activated through ritual or other kinds of behavior like that. We've talked more about kind of organized religion and less about what I would call spiritual experiences.
So to go back, you know, I sorry I kind of hit you hard with that,
that's
but
fine.
You know, it's like fear, like to say, I take offense when people try to reduce religion to one thing or this thing or that thing, because it's so complex and myriad. That's why it's so difficult to even define, but yet it's a part of the human experience. I mean, you know, what's religion and when did it start and how to define it, it's part of the human experience. And it's been with us for a long time, and I'm sure Dr. Miller would like to expunge us all and relieve of that burden. But to me, it's like, you know, when you're smitten by somebody you see, you fall in love instantly. Like you run into a girl, or you see, you know, somebody in class or something, and it's love at first sight. Well, that's how I compare people's, you know, conversion when they first come. For many people, you know, religious. William James, the great pragmatist, wrote varieties of religious experience, and he calls it the twice born. You know, it's that born again where everything changes, where it's a revolution in view, a conversion, everything's turned upside down. How do we describe that? What terms do we find to define it? That's the most difficult thing to do, and to say whether it's just fear or a search for order or hierarchy, those are all denigrative and pejorative in in some kind of reductionistic sense. That was way too many words.
So because it offends you, it's wrong?
No, not at all. I gave a reasoned expression for my position. To say that it was just offended me, I said it offended me rationally and intellectually, and I gave my reasons for it.
All right.
Okay, my question is directed towards everyone. I mean, talking about science and religion, there's a lot of different ways, of course, you go about living your life. Science way, very religious way, kind of go in the middle, moderation. My question is, I guess, God used science as a tool for some people to go in a different direction, right?
What? Say that again?
Closer to Him.
What did you just say?
I said God, I believe God can use science as a tool to bring people closer to Him, or draw them closer to Him. Just how He uses, bad events happening, death, any kind of other negative, emotion that would, a theologist would say that would, bring you closer to God. If you have faith, that would bring you closer to God. So my question is, you go different ways of living your life. Is there a moderation, happy trail that we could just take the easy road? Because, everybody's individualist. I take consideration of both very highly. Ken might take more the theologist way of going it, and Miller might go more the science way of going it. So we're all a little different. So is there a different way of, is there an answer, I guess?
What if we employ the best that everything has to offer? And what if, where one of us is not particularly adept at thinking scientifically, we can borrow from that tradition or that discipline? Every encounter with existence is an occasion for us to experience more than we would have had we not had such an encounter.
What I'm trying to say is the very left wing and very right wing are very far from the truth. That more in the middle of using both and compromising would be a more healthy way. Now that just might be me, I might be wrong.
Well, the philosophers will help. That's kind of a Greek
because we're supposed to find our own truth.
The ancient Greeks, the path of moderation.
We're born into a society where we're given the truth. This is why we live your life, government-wise, religion-wise. We're trying to find my own way of life. So is that...
Well, here, let me give you a ridiculous example. My wife just walked out. If I said to her, the two paths are love or hate, I could love you or I could hate you, but I'm going to choose the middle way. As a theologian, as a rationalist, and as a theist, I would say, it's not.
You can't have different on the bad. You just love her just as much. That doesn't mean you don't love her.
I feel like you have to be a pluralist. I feel like you have to accept that there's not just one way.
Well, that's not what Jesus says. He says, I am
so
the way, the truth, and the life. It's like there is only one way, and salvation comes through Christ, and I don't see any moderation in His act on the cross either. So, we keep glossing over the harsh edges to make it palatable. We lose the power of religion.
All that to say, I'm not a big. I think there's wisdom in finding balance at times, but then there's wisdom in not. There are times when we ought to be absolutely radically going in one direction rather than another. If my child's heading towards the stove to put her hand on the element, I don't think there's a middle way there. I think it's my most urgent action is to make sure she does it. And then after that's done, then I have some choices to make about how do I train and encourage her not to do that again.
You let her do it, she'll never do it again.
You took away an opportunity for her to learn.
If I let her do it, she may never be able to do it again. And what would the authorities think of a parent who lets his child touch the hot element? there's more.
I mean, why want to live a sheltered life? Why not live that experience? I wouldn't want my dad to say, no, don't touch that, it's hot.
It builds character to learn your
You have to learn it like on
They just don't
yourself.
like your example.
Well, I'm concerned that if I let the authorities know that my children have the option of not wearing their seatbelt, that my children get to choose whether or not to put their hand on the elements, that my children are entitled not to wear a life jacket in a boat in Ontario, which is against the law in Canada, those authorities will hold me accountable for a decision that is legally wrong. And I can argue till I'm blue in the face that there's a middle way here, but they're going to say, yeah, whatever, dude, he's on a jet.
Yeah.
We're going to knock out one, maybe two more questions, guys, and then we're going to conclude.
This question is for the pastor. Apostle Paul, he said that he fully preached the gospel by power, with power, signs, and demonstrations. And then Jesus proved who he was by healing the sick, raising the dead, so on and so forth. So therefore, you and me, as a Christian, should be walking in those signs and wonders to where we can prove that Jesus is real. Would you agree with that?
My understanding of Jesus doing signs and wonders such as healings and raising people from the dead was it was his way of saying you can trust that what I say is true because look at what I can do. If I have the power to bring somebody back from the dead, then maybe what I have to say is legitimate. Or even stronger than that, is compels you to follow. I don't know if I addressed your question or not. I just gave you my understanding of signs and wonders as they're rendered in the... What if he was the only one that did them?
No, he's not the only one.
He's not the only one that did them. There's all kinds of...
You know, that's an
That's a
interesting...
good religious experience question because there's signs and wonders all over.
It's a good question because, you know, you're taking proof, which is kind of a scientific word, and you're using it in a religious context. And it's really an interesting question because you're right. I mean, the signs and wonders were used to show the glory of God, to kind of, in a sense, prove. And I don't know, you're making me think kind of differently about how proof is used, you know, in both scientific and religious contexts. There's a kind of a family resemblance in the way that we think about it. It's an interesting question.
So if I said that, hey, I'm a Christian, and we got this debate, and there's no way to...
Well, you would have to show me, you prove to me by the way that you live your life, and you would show me by your works, right? By your witness.
What if you were missing an arm or a hand, and I was able, not I, but God through me, lay hands on you, and that arm grew out, for example? Would you believe then in God?
Well, I don't know, because Jesus says, you know, Greeks demand signs and Jews want wonders. So, you know, Paul wants you to believe by faith. And in some sense or in some level, Paul wants you to believe by faith. And the reformer Luther says alone. He puts that in his translation of the Bible, faith alone. You know, sola fidus, or how's it go? By faith alone. Forget my Latin.
You're good. Yeah, that's both.
Was I close enough? That's kind of a pun. But so, you know, that there's a whole range of questions that are very interesting on that level. I'm not sure. This is getting very theological.
But just theoretically, if you were to see that, would you believe that there was...
I don't know. You could be a
I believe
magician,
that you got something going on.
You could be a magician or a trickster. Hey, there's that crazy guy in Las Vegas. He pulls elephants out of hats and stuff. Do I believe in God? I don't. Should I? I mean, the demons do tricks. Satan has his tricks. I don't know. Politicians. I I don't know.
All right, we got one more question, guys. Go ahead.
My question is actually for the pastor. Earlier you stated that God, or our Creator, demands that we see everybody equal, and you keep talking about the sanctity of life. So my question to you is, how do you explain Christian view on the homosexual community if God is supposed to see everybody's equal?
Because in God's eyes, all human life is sacred, then in human eyes, all human life then is sacred as well.
But some is more sacred.
Not every
Yeah, but
Christian
you're
pastor
getting into
idea.
individual
Yeah, I'm just saying, I'm
ideas.
like, a whole,
So-
it's seen as like, the homosexual community is shunned upon, you're not supposed to talk about it, you're not supposed to do it, it's against it, if you do it, you're going to hell right away. So how do you explain that with the fact that you also said that there's a sanctity of life and that everybody should be treated equal?
There are particular times in Christian history when, in my assessment, Christians erroneously identify particular social issues and social ills as beyond hope, beyond God's ability to redeem and save. And that when they do that, they do not accurately communicate what the God who created all humanity is communicating. All that to say, as a representative of the Christian faith, I recognize that far too many followers of Jesus Christ have not held that life is sacred, and that they themselves need to hold themselves to the standard that they themselves expect of others. I apologize if I'm able to on behalf of other Christians who aren't consistent in considering that if someone's made in the image of God, that they're thereby afforded inalienable human rights.
I think you're
You
kind
say
of
that,
your
but
question.
though in the Bible it states that homosexuality is wrong, you're going to hell. So in your own Bible it states that. How do you explain that? In your Bible it states that. At the same time, God commands to treat everyone equal.
Well, if you would care to have a root beer with me, we could try to find where the Bible explicitly states that.
I just know, with faith, like how do you sit here and say that as Christians?
Well,
you're
the Bible
going to demand
speaks-
everyone treated equal,
yeah.
when that is based off of this fact that homosexuality is wrong, which really is not.
The Bible says that any human sin is worthy of hell.
Can I jump in and maybe...
So it's not just that particular ill.
The scope of the question, maybe just a little. First of all, thanks for asking that question. I've been waiting to ask that question all night. So, but I want to thank Ken. That was a very thoughtful response. Thank you. But I guess my question is, why has religion historically, and I maybe Dr. Batchelder can answer this one, but the obsession with sex, from female genital mutilation to the obsession with limiting the rights of gay and lesbian people. Why the obsession with sex? Because I think that's something that comes only, every movement for like greater freedom in terms of choices for that has been only a reaction against attempts to limit those freedoms. So why the obsession with sex?
I think all religious traditions have, in dealing with the wonderful reality of sexuality, have struggled to the point where it seems that there's some neurosis and obsession. But to me, that's a reflection of the general human condition. It seems all humans have this neurotic obsession with sex, not just religious people. So
we're all perverts.
Well, that's one way maybe to put it. It's because I would say it's because sexuality is one of the most profound human experiences, and it was designed to be profoundly good, and that's what we all want. Good service.
And everybody
everybody who came. This was a great turnout. Remember that the Philosophy Club meets every other Tuesday. Next Tuesday would be that every other, so start there.
At the Ale House?
The Ale House where we are right now, 4:30 is when that starts. So
Don't forget Religion and Science, Philosophy 150 next semester.
Thank you so much, guys. We'll see you next time for this.
Follow the Facebook page for updates.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.